2 Kings chapter 6, beginning at verse 8. Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel, that being God's people. God's people has some enemies. And the king of the enemy camp, after conferring with his officers, said, hey, I'm going to set up my camp. We're going to set up our camp in such and such a place. Why? Because we want to trap God's people. We want to set up an ambush for God's people because we want to take God's people out. Because there is an enemy who hates God's people. If you are God's people, you need to understand there is an enemy who hates you and who is setting traps for you. And you'll want to underline that phrase there, in such and such a place. I will set up my camp in such and such a place. But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, to God's people. The man of God in this passage being Elisha. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, and he said, beware of passing that place, such and such a place. Now, such and such a place is just a general way of referring to, basically what he's saying is, such and such a place is all over the place. Everywhere they went, the enemy is trying to set traps. It's not just one specific location, it's everywhere. Everywhere you go, the enemy's going to try to set traps for you in such and such a place. And the man of God said, beware of passing such and such a place, because the Arameans are going down there. Beware, don't go down to such and such a place, because the enemy has set up a camp down there. He set up a trap to take you out. Church, if you are a blood-bought, spirit-filled, passionate, on fire for God, moving for God believer, if you have sold out to Him and you are serving in His kingdom, serving and making a difference, you need to understand, if you are that person that every day when you wake up, the enemy goes, oh my gosh, he's up. Or, oh my gosh, she's up. I can't believe it. What are we going to do? Oh my gosh, he got up another day. We got to do something. You need to know the enemy is setting traps for you down at such and such a place. You need to know this today. There is an enemy who's coming against you, and he's got traps for you down at such and such a place. And we've all got a such and such a place. What is yours? Believe me, if you know what it is, you can trust that the enemy knows what your such and such a place is. He knows what it takes to bring you down. We may all have different such and such a places, but we all got them. For some of us, such and such a place is our mouth. For some of us, such and such a place is our anger. For some of us, such and such a place is our gossip. Such and such a place is our greed. For some of us, such and such a place is the bar, or the bottle, or the pill, or whatever else we use to escape reality and get high. For some of us, such and such a place is the things we look at on the computer after 11 o'clock at night when everybody else has gone to bed. For some of us, such and such a place is a phone number. That person we go to when the one at home is not satisfying. For some of us, such and such a place is the bedroom. For some of us, such and such a place could be those sex texts that you get from that member of the opposite sex who's trying to bring you down to such and such a place. But we've all got them. You know what yours is? Because you can trust the enemy does. And he has set up traps for you down at such and such a place. The sad part is, many of us, some 20 years ago, got lured down to such and such a place. And you ain't left since. The enemy has rendered you helpless. The enemy has made you powerless. You're making no You have lost your destiny. You have lost your purpose, and you don't even know it. Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, was a man who knew very well about such and such a place. Jesus said, when everything was breaking loose, he said, look, stay here. Watch and pray. Because look, your spirit's willing, but your flesh is weak. And your flesh is drawn to such and such a place. And the enemy knows that. And Peter ended up denying his Lord 3 times. He learned the hard way about such and such a place. And that's why he wrote in the scriptures in 1 Peter 5, verse 8, discipline yourselves. Stay alert. For your adversary, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. You have an enemy on the prowl. You have an enemy camp who has set up traps for you down at such and such a place. But God, like Elisha did to the king of Israel, has said, but guess what? I'm giving you the plans of the enemy right here. I'm telling you what he's doing, and I'm telling you how to stay out of such and such a place. But you need to listen. You need to take heed. You need to pray. You need to watch. You need to be in church. You need to read your Bibles. You need to worship. You need to witness. And if you do that, even when things get difficult, it will keep you out of such and such a place. Do you know what your such and such a place is? God has warned us. We are not without excuse, and we will all stand and give an account for what we did with our such and such a place. The enemy wants to destroy you. I want to introduce you to someone who got duped and taken down to such and such a place 18 years ago. And she spent the last 18 years being deceived and being held captive by what she thought was a locked door that was never really locked at all, thinking she could not get out of such and such a place, going to the wrong places for the wrong answers. But God in His great mercy, when you go down to such and such a place, when we're prone, He is able to run after us and bring us out in His great power. And that is what He did for her here in this worship center just a few weeks ago. He delivered her. He came, slammed open the door and said, it's time to come out of such and such a place and no longer be in prison. And I want to introduce you to her and her testimony right now. Madison, come on up.
Sorry? Sorry. Yes, sir. Okay, gotcha. Hey, guys. Good morning. I'm Madison, and I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ. If you would have met me about a little over a month ago, I would have introduced myself a lot different. I would have said I'm Madison, and I'm a alcoholic. Or I'm Madison, and I'm a drug addict. And I've said this since I was 16, over and over and over. I can't even tell you more than 1,000 times. And something in me said, I'm just saying it. I don't know. I just don't want to surrender to that. But my parents were both godly Christian. And I had a hard time believing it. I always have a hard time with that word, too. But that Bill preached on. What was it? Thank you. But anyway, so I pretty much believed that for a long time. And I thought I was just liberal. And I just really prided myself in being non-judgmental and open-minded. And my mom believed in Christianity, and my dad too. And I was like, okay, I'll go to church with you on Easter and Christmas. And I wanted to believe. Well, I've been going to church with my mom for about consecutively for about 9 weeks. And then April the 7th, so I went up to the altar about every single time because I've been struggling. And April the 7th, Doug was preaching. I'm tight right now, guys. Sorry, but because it's like huge for me. But he was preaching, and the whole time I was just like this. I knew it was for me. I knew it was for me. I had that Friday, April the 5th. Before that, I had went to this church, and I said, God, I'm done. I'm done. Help me. Just help me. I don't know who you are. Just help me. And he heard my cry. And on the 7th, Doug, you had that sermon, and I went down here. All I know is I was pretty much floated to this altar right here. I don't know who was beside me. I know my mom was beside me because she always is. And then I look up again, and chain breakers on, and I'm like, wow, my goodness. And I knew what had happened. I knew that I had been delivered. I had been delivered. Thank you. Yes, and it was awesome. I didn't tell anybody that night. I was like, everybody's going to think I'm crazy. Like, okay, whatever. I don't want to say this. And then the next day, I remember, well, actually that night, this is very important. That night, I was going to go to an AA meeting because I normally go to those. And I was like, God, I don't know. Jesus, I really want to, like, learn about you. Like, I feel like I really, really want to. I don't want to go to this AA meeting. I really want to be, like, I want to learn your word. And I said, God, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. So, and he said something like, just go home and open your Bible. So I went home and opened my Bible. I didn't know where to start. And I just opened it to Luke. I said, God, show me what you want me to see. And he said, Luke, I don't know, somehow or another, I opened it to this first thing. It was Luke 13:10. And it said, Luke 13:11 is what it is. And it said, behold, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, Woman, you are set free. You are set free from your infirmity. And he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. And when I was reading this, thanks. And so, sorry, God, that was loud. So when I was reading this, it said 18 years, and I said, okay, hold on, 16, because I'm 31 right now, guys. So I said 16, 17, 18, 19. So add that up, that's 15 years. So I was like, God, that's pretty impressive. 15 years, 18 years, that's pretty close. And then I was like, well, that's pretty cool, like, whatever. And then he said something. No, he said, I'm not going to say something. He said, count again. And I was like, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You know, I was like, 15 years, cool, like, it's close. And then he goes, count again. And I was like, okay. From 13, I started at 13 years old is when I really first started drinking. And that's when I said, if I could feel like this the rest of my life, I remember taking the first drink and I thought, if I could feel like this the rest of my life, I'd be okay. And so God showed me that. That's 18 years, counting from 13 to 31. And I sat there and put it on paper because I was like, no way, no way. And there's just no way that this. And then I just started bawling. And I knew that God had showed me that. Because there's no, I was like, oh, thank you, God, you heard my cry. You heard me. You heard me. And I've been delivered. Next day, he told me to tell my mom that the fight's over. Fight's over. Anyway. And so, I know there's going to be challenges and struggles. Always, life's going to have those. But like Jesus Christ is real. I always said that. I went to Celebrate Recovery and I'd say, I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ. And I'd be like, I want to be. But, and I really did. But like, there's no doubt in my mind, Jesus Christ is real. And no doubt. I'll shout it to the rooftops. Like that's, and he saved me. So I'm just thankful. Yeah, thanks. That's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Now, if y'all don't remember nothing else today, if somebody asks you what happened in church, y'all can say, Lindsay Lohan got delivered. All right? I always tell her she looks like Lindsay Lohan. Beware of your such and such a place. The enemy is trying to get you down there and render you powerless and hold you captive. But also take note, if you're down there, God is able to bring you out. If you just reach out. So the king of Israel checked on these places indicated by the man of God where the traps were being set. And time and again, sure enough, as God would be faithful, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. God has given you warning. It's right here. Pick it up. You got to read it. Come on. You're wondering why you're struggling with those temptations. Well, this, of course, enraged the enemy, the king of Aram. You need to understand, when you decide to avoid such and such a place, the enemy is going to be enraged. He is going to be angry. He is going to put a target on your back. And the king of Aram summoned his officers and he demanded of them, tell me, which one of you is on the side of the king of Israel? He thought he had a traitor in the camp. They're like, none of us, my lord the king. But it's Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel. He's the one telling the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. You'll want to take note of that part. Because that should just tell you like, and Lord help us all, including me. Like this, even the stuff we do in private is not really private. God knows it all. We'll get away with nothing. But the king of Aram, the enemy, said, you go find out where Elisha is, so I can send men to capture him. And the report came back, he is in Dothan. Then the enemy sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. Let me repeat again. They sent horses and chariots and a strong force. Just to be clear, when you begin to avoid and walk out of such and such a place, the enemy is going to take note and send, like a cancer that comes back, he is going to send a strong force to bring you down. The temptations you thought you had conquered, he will multiply. Don't be surprised when this happens. Be encouraged that you are doing good and doing well, and that you have awakened the enemy, because the enemy is now afraid of the impact and the potential that you have. Don't be discouraged. Don't go, oh, but I'm no, and just don't do it. Stay out of such and such a place. When the enemy multiplies his attack, generally that's a really good sign that you're on the right track. Keep moving forward. When that stuff hits you out of the blue, just know the enemy's at work. God has said, stay out of such and such a place. But when the servant of Elisha's servant, got up and went out early the next morning, he saw that an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Now, right there. It'd be one thing, like Elisha is one dude. So he'd be saying, send an assassin, send one dude, send a handful. But the enemy didn't do that. The enemy sent the whole army. You understand? He sent everything he had. He sent the whole army after one guy. When you start making impact for the kingdom, that's what the enemy's going to do. And the servant got up and he went out early the next morning, and an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. And he said, oh my Lord, Elisha, what are we going to do? What are we going to do now? You ever been in that place? Everything was perfect one day, and you woke up in the next, and everything fell apart. And you are left in this space where you go, oh God, what am I going to do now? You ever been there? Give it time. Sometimes it happens overnight. Sometimes it happens across the span of 10 to 12 years. But there are those moments in life when we wake up and all we can do is smell and see and sense that we are absolutely surrounded by horrible, tragic circumstances. And the only thing we're left with is, oh my Lord, what am I going to do? And notice what Elisha says in verse 16. He doesn't go, I don't know, what are we going to do? Call 911, oh my gosh. He says just 3 words. Sometimes, we think we have to give this great thing. He just says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And then he adds to those 3 words, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Yeah, but Elisha, have you seen? We're surrounded. What? No. Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. There are people in your life today that need those words. There are people all around you whose lives are breaking apart. And they need you, person of hope, to bring them the hope that says, don't be afraid. I know it's bad. I know things seem awful. But those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And sometimes we do that through a phone call, we do it through an email or a text, or sometimes we just get in the car and drive over. Sometimes we do it by delivering a meal. But there are people who need, in your life today, who need you to stop sitting still and sitting silent. Their lives are being shredded, and they need to hear you say, it's going to be all right. I want to introduce you to someone who just a couple weeks ago, everything was perfect one day, and the next she woke up and found herself in the middle of everything breaking apart, asking the question, oh Lord, what am I going to do now? But then there was a group of people who stepped up and said, don't be afraid. Those who are with us are greater than those who are with them.
Good morning. My name is Ashley, and for those of you that don't know, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, so the day after Easter, I got a phone call and found out that my dad was tragically killed in an airplane accident. I don't know that you're ever really prepared to hear that a loved one has died, but especially in this situation, it was so tragic that you kind of just go numb. And for me, I'm one of 3 siblings, and I'm the oldest, and so I've always been the little mom, taking care of my siblings and, what's coming next. And so I think in that moment, I kind of went numb and then went into my mom mode of, okay, what am I going to do about my siblings? What am I going to do about my stepmom? How am I going to make sure my husband and my kids are okay? Like, my head was kind of spinning. And before I knew it, people were showing up at our house to offer support. What can we do? How can we help? But still, in my mind, I was like, no, I just need to handle this because I'm kind of a control freak. And so that night, John Curran was sitting next to me, and he was like, people are going to want to offer to do for you, and you just need to say yes. I was like, okay, John. But in my mind, I was still thinking, no, I'm just going to handle this because that's just the way I do. And the next day came, and more people started calling, and more people started texting and putting prayer posts on Facebook and text and what can we do to help, bringing meals, sending cards. It was just an overflow of love. And I remember sitting on our bed and just crying, like I just had one of those moments. I just had to let it out. And I remember saying to the Lord, I don't even know what to pray. I don't know what to say. I don't know. I was so numb. And in that moment, I felt a peace. And it was like the Lord was saying, I got this. I got you. And not only do I have you, but all of you had me, and my husband and my kids. And the prayers that came in were beyond, I really cannot put it into words, because there were just moments I couldn't do for myself. But through your prayers, we've gotten through it. And so I say all that to say that I had somebody say to me, they hugged me and they said, I don't know what to say to you. I really don't. And I said, it's okay. I said, just the hug or just the I'm praying for you meant more than you can imagine. So just know there are people here and in your life that are going through just junk. And they need you. And so if you don't know what to do, a hug or a prayer or a text or a call means more than you will ever know, because knowing that we had our church family and friends and everybody behind us has made something so tragic. There's some good that's come out of that. So thank you.
Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. Who in your life needs to hear that today? And I want you to notice what happens next. Elisha prayed, and he said, "Oh Lord, open my servant's eyes so he can see." Now let's be real clear. His servant was not blind. The servant, if he had been blind, would not have been able to see the fact that he was completely surrounded by the enemy. So he's not talking about, Lord, open his natural eyes. No, he's actually talking about the eyes of faith. Lord, open his eyes and help him to see what the natural eye cannot see. Help him to see what only the eyes of faith can see. Lord, when everything else is crashing in, when it seems like the world's volume is louder and longer, God, give him the eyes of faith and help him to see through the eyes of faith that you are greater, and those who are with us are greater than those who are in the world. Give him the eyes of faith, Lord, and help him to see, and watch what God did. Lord, open his eyes so that he may see. And then the Lord opened the servant's eyes. And he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. See, that's what God does. Just when you think everything is falling apart and all you can see is brokenness, God says, no, focus on my promises. Focus on what I said. Focus on that which you know to be true in your heart through the eyes of faith. And when you do, you will begin to see the hills filled with God's army that is greater than anything in this world that you are facing. But the problem is, for many of us, it's kind of like the servant and Elisha. When the servant woke up that day, all he could see was what was wrong. I am surrounded. My circumstances are terrible. But Elisha said, actually, no, don't be afraid. Let me show you what's right. Let's don't look at what's wrong. Let's look at what's right. So we've got right in our lives. Now, every day we wake up and there's right going on in our lives. This is all that's right. We wake up, most of you got over here by car. You own a car and it's temperature controlled. And most of you, I'm pretty sure you woke up today with a roof over your head. There was hail in the area last night. I don't see anybody with any skull damage. You had something to keep the hail off of your head. It's a house you'll go back to today. And when you leave this place, some of you have already begun thinking about the fact of what you're going to eat. Guess what? Not only do you have money to supply your food, but you will actually have a choice of what you will eat. And you won't have to stand in line 3 hours or walk 3 miles to get it across a desert in your bare feet. And the last time I checked, no, there's no naked people in here. Everybody in here has clothes too. And some of you probably have wardrobes and closets that are bigger than the bathrooms over there. You are blessed. There is much right in your life. And every day we wake up and we're surrounded with good people. And we're surrounded with people who love us. And there's so much good going on. But in our flesh, and it's easy to do this, when stuff starts going bad, when something breaks loose, all we can hear is the bad. And all of a sudden, Even though we got all this right going on here, because the bad has happened, all I can do is see and hear the bad. And it doesn't matter how much good there is, all I can do is focus on what's wrong. And Elisha says, don't be afraid. Look up into the hills. You got to stop looking around in the city just as what is wrong, but you got to see through the eyes of faith with all that is right. And when we begin to see through the eyes of faith, all that is bad goes down. And we hear what's right. Come on, y'all did this already once. And what's right begins to drown out what's wrong. But then watch what God does. Here's what I want you to really notice when we begin to see with the eyes of faith. Verse 18 says, as the enemy came down toward Elisha, Elijah prayed. Now I want you to notice something really cool here. I want you to notice the position of the enemy. Okay? Elijah and his servant are surrounded by the enemy. The enemy is all in the streets of the city. But God has outnumbered the enemy up here in the hills. And God is saying, when you see with the eyes of faith, yeah, you might be surrounded by your enemy down in the streets. But if you look up in the hills, you'll notice that I've got your enemy surrounded. And if I've got your enemy surrounded, I've got you surrounded too. So watch what I'm going to do with your enemy. Now notice this is very important. Because many of us, we think when we get surrounded by the enemy, what we want God to do is, God, I want you to take the enemy out. I want to look to my left, I want to look to my right, and I want to know that you're on the scene when I call you right at the moment and doing things the way I want them to do and take them out right now. But sometimes God says, no. You need to look up behind you. And you need to see with the eyes of faith. Because though you might have the enemy down with you in the streets, I've got both you and your enemy surrounded. You know why? Because I'm about to do something with your enemy. Now watch what God does. So as the enemy came down toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord. He said, strike these people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. And Elisha told them, he's talking to this whole entire army that has come to kill him. This is what God does. Now he's talking to his enemy. You understand? See, maybe you're like me. I'm not going to lie. In my flesh, I got some people right now that I would just soon say, Lord, I just soon you strike them mute and not ever have them talk again because of their gossip. That's what I want you to do, God. Don't make me have to talk to them. Don't make me have to deal with them. Lord, I can't even bear the thought that I might even become friends with them again. But God, watch what God does. He says, he's talking to him and he says to the enemy, this is not the road and this is not the city. Hey, even though y'all came to strike me down, follow me and I will lead you to the man you are looking for. I mean, look at what God's doing. Now he's making a fool. God will make a fool of your enemies. Hear me. God will make a fool of your enemies when you stand. And he led them down to Samaria. And after they entered the city, Elijah said, Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see. Then the Lord opened their eyes and they looked and they were inside Samaria. So at one time when the enemy thought they had Elijah surrounded, what God ended up doing is saying, no, your enemy has you surrounded, but I've got your enemy surrounded. And if you stand by faith, watch, I'm going to use you to lead your enemy into my camp where we will both surround the enemy. So where it once was, the enemy's got us surrounded. Now the enemy's completely surrounded. I used Elisha to walk the enemy down and surround him, and watch what God happens. Watch what God does. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, shall I kill them? I mean, that's what we'd want, right? You just soon see some of your enemies. Well, okay, murder's a sin, but Lord, broken leg wouldn't do too bad. Maybe a little starvation for a little bit. They could use it. No. Don't kill them. Elisha answered. Would you kill men who you have captured with your own sword or bow? No. Here's what you do. Set food and water before them. Say what? Set food and water before them so they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them. And after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away and they returned to their master. So the bands from Aram stopped raiding the territory of Israel. See what God did? What God did in his great sovereignty. You see, it's one thing when God wipes out your enemy. That's good enough. We like that. It's one thing when God takes away our enemy, but it's another thing when God actually removes our enemy, not by taking him out, but by making our enemy our friend. It's a whole other thing when God uses our enemy and uses our difficult circumstances to our good. And they start playing together. You see what happens? You see what happens? Those things the enemy means for our bad, God will take them and work them and use them to the good. And God will get rid of your enemies by actually making them the things that make you stronger. That's why the Bible says, in our weakness, God's strength is perfected. See what he does. See what he does. And I want to introduce you to someone today whom that very thing happened. And we'll close with this. Here is a young girl who was completely surrounded by her enemies. Who, if you said, let's deal somebody a bad hand, this is about as bad as it gets. But God took every bad hand and he worked it for her good. This is what he does.
Good morning. My name's Cassie. The last 5 years have been really hard for me and my kids. I was 26, was pregnant with my son, found out I had breast cancer. Went through multiple surgeries after I had him, came back, and then I had to have a mastectomy. In the middle of all of that, I found out my husband was cheating on me. So then I was facing my marriage failing, the cancer, and doing it all by myself. I was really, really scared. Lost my home, going through the divorce. Me and my 2 kids, nobody was there to help me. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I realized that the last 11 years of my marriage, I treated my husband as if he was the one I could count on for, for everything, my faith. He was my God in the marriage. So when that went away, I didn't know what I was going to do. How was I going to do this by myself? How was I going to take care of my kids, work, provide a home, and start over all by myself? I was terrified. But God's good. God is really, really good. I came here back in December, and God's timing is perfect. And he reminded me that in the middle of all those horrible things that were going on in my life, I was never alone, even though I felt so alone. I struggled daily with being alone and my appearance from all the surgeries, and I wasn't happy. I was very depressed, and I was ready to give up. But I came here, and I realized that I don't have to give up. And I am fearfully and wonderfully made in his image. And in the middle of all of this as well, my kids have come to Christ. And it's great. My daughter is so excited about anything that has to do with Jesus or church. I'm sending Ashley and the preacher's videos of my daughter singing Christian music. My son is really excited. So if going through all those horrible things that were going on in my life was just to bring my kids to Christ, it was worth every bit of it. So I am glad to say that God is good, and we are on to new beginnings, and we're doing great. So thank you.
Come on, give him praise. See, it's an amazing thing when God actually takes your moments where you think you're surrounded by the enemy. And I'm not saying that he causes those things or that he desires those things to be brought in our lives necessarily. But when the world is broken all around us, God can begin to work and take any situation and work it for his glory and work it for our good. Because that's who he is. Because those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. My senior year, it was late September. We were about a third of the way through the soccer season. And about a third of the way through that year, a guy slid tackled me from behind, hit my knee and blew out my knee and tore my anterior cruciate ligament, and I had to get reconstructive knee surgery and spend the next 2 months on crutches, and that ended my senior year of playing soccer. Totally screwed up basketball and almost threatened to take away what was my main sport, which was tennis, coming up in the spring. And I remember just being in a really dark place during that time because I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything. I was trying to rehab to get back, and it was difficult. The most difficult part was standing on the sidelines of all the games like this right here and not being able to finish what I had started probably 12 years earlier with all the guys that we played together growing up. And that was a really hard place for me to be. And I remember kind of being in that phase when mid-season came. And as usual, I was standing on the sidelines just like this in crutches watching the game. We had scheduled kind of a mid-season game with Richmond County. That's Rockingham. Now, any of you know Richmond County, you'll know that is actually a football powerhouse. This was the first year they were starting a soccer team, and we were doing them a favor by putting a game on their schedule to play. But if you know Richmond County, you know they grow them big down there. Those are like big and mean dudes. And I'm for certain, they were a 4A school, we were 2A, and I'm still for certain, I wasn't quite, they sent some of their football players to play on that soccer team too. And it was just one of them kind of games, even though I was standing on the sideline, it was one of them kind of games where things were chippy and very physical, and you knew something was about to happen. You knew that a fight was going to break out at any time. Well, sure enough, about a third of the way through second half, one of their guys slid tackled one of our guys. And our guys, after being pushed and bruised and whatever all game long, finally got up and just got in the guy's face. And it was one of them going on. Well, then out of nowhere, one of the Richmond County guys, the other guy, came running and launched himself in the air at our guy and boom, and sickled him across the head, knocking him to the ground just like that right there. It would have been a great wrestling move. And as soon as that happened, sure enough, you know what happened next? Right, everybody knelt down and started praying. Not their bench emptied and our bench emptied, and it was a full-on brawl. And I'm telling you, I kid you not, it was just like a scene out of an Avengers movie or Lord of the Rings or Braveheart. They were coming this way, we were coming this way, and it was just like, and the two were converging. And when all that was going on, now, you got to understand, here's me over here on the sideline. And I'm like, Well, I've missed the whole season. I ain't about to miss no fight. So our guys are running, and I'm trailing behind, going like this. So you got all the forces coming together, and here's just me going behind, doing this, doing the best I could to get to the scene. And sure enough, whoo, and it was like a collision. And there were fights. It was one big, massive, full fight. Coach, it was beautiful. But it was, and this was before like sheriffs and police were all over the games. I think there may have been one deputy there or something. But it was crazy. And I was like Jim Valvano when NC State won the title. He's running around looking for somebody to shake, but he can't find anybody. And I'm just running around looking, and I'm looking for somebody to fight, but there's nobody. I'm just doing like this. So what I did is I don't know, nobody would touch me during that. I don't know if it's because they felt sorry for me because I was on crutches, or maybe that because they thought if I'm crazy enough to be out there on one leg, they don't want to mess with me. I don't know what it was. So I just started pulling some of their guys off of our guys. And I went to pull about the second or third guy off. And sure enough, as soon as I pulled him off, he stood up and he looked at me, and I'm standing there like this. And then I look off to my left, and there's another one of their guys on my flank. And then I look off to my right, and there's another one of their guys. And I am, at this moment, completely, and all around us, I'm telling you, it's like a movie. There's fights, and it's carrying on, and cussing, and yelling, and everything is going crazy. And here I am, right here in the middle of this brawl, and I'm surrounded by 3 of their players. Just like this. And they're looking at me just like this. And I said, come on. I got one for each of you. I said, you gonna get this, you gonna get this, and when I'm done, you gonna get these right here. I said, come on. And do you know what they did? As soon as I said that, they all went. And when they did that, I was like, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Come on, you want some more? I'll take, yeah, that's right. Come on, that's right. And then I turned around and looked over my shoulder and saw what was really causing all the fear in them. As soon as I turned around and looked behind, now you got to understand this was a home game for us, okay? So this was at Parkwood, and all our fans were in the stands. They were the visiting team. And so about that time when I was like, come on, and they were like, and I turned around and looked, and by that time, everyone in our stands had left the stands and was making their way down to the field, all led by the parents of the players. And you know when parents are walking with that look in their eyes like, you don't mess with my kid, you don't mess with my kid. All the parents were walking that way, coming onto the field. And they were like, and they were led by Jim McGee. Jim McGee was that guy. Every team has them. Every team, your high school teams, they have them. They have that one guy who's the loudest, who's always getting thrown out of the games for saying stuff to the ref, who you can always hear him. You're always like, Jim McGee was 6'4", about 250. He was a hard man, and he was leading them all onto the field, and he was walking like this right here. And as sure enough as he walked onto the field, the ref said, you can't go out there. And Jim McGee said, you ain't that gum big enough to stop me. And he threw him to the side, and he came out, and he started throwing people around, and everything cleared really quick. People, when I thought I was surrounded, when I thought I was at the end of my rope, and the only thing I had left to do was say, come on, oh, what am I going to do now? All I had to do was turn around and see the forces of Parkwood High School coming after me. I want you to know today, when you are surrounded, when the world has come all around you, you need to know all you got to do when all you got left is your beat up, pent down, and put down and one-legged crutch self. All you got to do is turn around, and you will see up in the stands that at just the right time, God has sent his heavenly forces down onto the field. And guess who will be leading the way? It will be Jesus the Christ himself. And he will come walking out. And when the enemy gets up and says, you can't go out there, Jesus will say, you ain't dadgum big enough to stop me, because greater are those with us than those with them.